The crimson dawn of Aries, a sacrifice in the stars. We begin our journey in the whispering dark, beneath the vast, silent tapestry we call the night sky. Welcome, traveler, to the circle of little animals, the Zodiac, a place where every star is not merely a distant burning orb of gas, but a syllable in an ancient story. Here, light is memory, and darkness is the ink of forgotten ages. These are not the gentle prophecies of a daily horoscope. They are the raw, tangled, and often tragic legends from which those symbols were born, etched into the cosmos as a permanent testament to the passions of gods and the plights of mortals. Look up. That familiar pull you feel, that instinct to connect the dots and find patterns in the void, is a practice the ancients called catasterism, the art of placing heroes, monsters, and memories into the heavens. They did not see cold constellations. They saw a celestial gallery of frozen moments, each one a memorial to an act of breathtaking love, horrifying vengeance, or desperate courage. The Zodiac is the most enduring of these galleries, a celestial road upon which the sun walks its annual pilgrimage. And as we begin this journey at the very dawn of that road, we find that the first step is not one of triumphant creation, but of harrowing escape and profound sacrifice. We begin with Aries, the ram, whose fleece was spun from sunlight and whose story is soaked in sorrow. To understand why a ram marks the beginning of the astrological year, heralding the vibrant rebirth of spring, we must first descend from the serene heavens into the smoky halls of a mortal kingdom, a place of insidious whispers and broken vows. Our story unfolds in Boeotia, a land ruled by King Athamos, a man whose heart was a battlefield for the affections of two formidable women, one born of the heavens, the other rooted firmly and ruthlessly in the earth. His first wife was Nephele, a creature of divine origin, a nymph fashioned from the clouds themselves by the hand of Hera. She was ethereal and gentle, her love as soft as mist, and she gave the king two children who shone with her otherworldly grace, a son, Phrixus, and a daughter, Helle. They were the light of the kingdom, reminders of a sacred union between the mortal and the divine. But the affections of mortal kings are as fickle as the weather, and Athamos' gaze soon fell upon Ino, a princess of Thebes, a woman of fire and flesh whose ambition burned with the intensity of a forge. Her beauty was sharp, her wit a finely honed blade, and in her eyes the children of the cloud nymph were nothing more than obstacles. They were living relics of a past love, standing in the way of the future she envisioned for her own sons. Ino's jealousy was not a fleeting storm, but a slow, creeping poison. She moved through the court with a serpent's grace, her words sweet honey laced with venom. She saw how the people revered Phrixus and Helle, how they saw in them the blessing of the gods, and she knew she could not challenge them directly. Her plan had to be as subtle and devastating as a blight, a sickness that would rot the kingdom from within, making the people themselves demand the very thing she desired. Her scheme began in the fertile fields of Boeotia. Under the cloak of secrecy, she conspired with the women of the kingdom, persuading them that if they parched the seed grain over fire before it was sown, their next harvest would be doubly blessed. It was a lie wrapped in a whisper of folk magic,
a piece of cunning so audacious that the simple farming folk, ever trustful, obeyed. They roasted the seeds of wheat and barley until the life within them was extinguished, and then they planted the dead husks in the earth. Spring came, but the fields remained stubbornly brown. The earth, which had always answered the plow with green shoots, now offered only dust. A creeping dread fell over Boeotia as the granaries emptied and the specter of famine loomed. The laughter of children was replaced by the gnawing ache of hunger, and the people's prayers to Demeter went unanswered. King Athamos, his face etched with worry, watched his kingdom wither, while Ino stood by his side, her face a perfect mask of concern, while her heart beat with a triumphant rhythm. The first part of her trap had been sprung. Desperate, King Athamos declared he would send messengers to the holiest of sites, the Oracle of Delphi, to seek Apollo's guidance. This was the moment Ino had been waiting for. Her agents, their palms heavy with her gold, intercepted the king's messengers on the road. They never reached the sacred slopes of Parnassus. Instead, they returned to the court bearing a false prophecy, a lie crafted by Ino and delivered with the solemn weight of divine authority. The words of the oracle fell upon the desperate court like hammer blows on an anvil. The famine was a punishment from the gods, the bribed messengers declared, a curse that could only be lifted by a sacrifice of unparalleled significance. The land demanded blood to be made fertile once more, but not the blood of an animal. It demanded the blood of the king's own house. It demanded the life of his firstborn son, Phrixus. A collective gasp swept through the hall. Athamos paled, his world collapsing into a vortex of horror. To sacrifice his own son? The boy who carried his mother's divine light in his eyes? It was unthinkable, a sacrilege beyond comprehension. But the famine was real, the cries of his people were sharp in his ears, and the prophecy, delivered with the unshakable authority of Delphi, left no room for argument. Ino wept crocodile tears, clinging to her husband's arm, her performance of grief so masterful that none could see the cold victory in her soul. The machinery of doom, so patiently constructed, began to turn, grinding towards its terrible conclusion. The day of the sacrifice dawned under a sky the color of lead. The air was thick with the scent of sacred incense and the palpable stench of fear. Phrixus, still just a boy, was dressed in a white ceremonial robe, his face pale but resolute. He did not understand the politics of the court or the depths of his stepmother's hatred, but he understood duty. He walked with a courage that shamed the grim-faced adults who led him to the high altar, a slab of cold stone overlooking the barren fields. Helle followed, her small face streaked with tears, her hand clutching her brother's, refusing to leave his side. King Athamos stood by the altar, the sacrificial knife in his trembling hand. His eyes met his son's, and in that gaze, a universe of love and regret passed between them. The crowd fell silent, a sea of gaunt faces turned upward, their hope and their horror tangled into a single, unbearable knot. The high priest began the final incantation. The knife was raised, its bronze edge glinting cruelly in the gray light. But from her domain among the clouds, Nephele had been watching. The cloud nymph who had been forced from her husband's side had not abandoned her children. Her grief was not a passive sorrow, but a gathering storm. As the knife began its descent, she unleashed her divine power. The sky did not crack with thunder, nor did it rain down fire. Instead, a light tore through the oppressive gloom, a brilliant, impossible gold. It descended from the heavens not as a bolt of lightning, but as a living creature. With a sound like the rushing of a great wind, a magnificent ram dropped from the clouds and landed softly on the altar, standing between Phrixus and the blade. This was no ordinary animal. This was Chrysomolos, a creature of myth, a gift from the god Hermes, whose fleece was spun from pure, living sunlight. It radiated a warmth that pushed back the chill of the day, and its eyes held a calm, ancient intelligence. Its horns curved like polished ivory, and from its shoulders sprouted.
After the crimson tale of Aries, a story of desperate flight and the high cost of salvation, the celestial road leads us to a different kind of myth. The stars of Taurus do not whisper of escape, but of capture, not of sacrifice given in thanks, but of a world taken by divine will. This is a story born from the gaze of a god, a desire that was not a simple flame, but a cosmic conflagration, a force of nature that would reshape a mortal life and give a continent its name. To understand the bull, you must first understand the unsettling nature of the god who wore its form, Zeus, king of Olympus. Her name was Europa, daughter of King Agenor of Phoenicia. Her beauty was not the loud, commanding sort, but a gentler, luminous quality, like the light of dawn held within a pearl. On a fine day, she and her handmaidens were in a seaside meadow, gathering flowers. This idyllic, innocent scene caught the eye of Zeus from his throne on Olympus. In an instant, the world narrowed to that small meadow. He was captivated not just by her beauty, but by her spirit, a gentle curiosity, an unguarded joy. A familiar, irresistible storm of desire began to gather within him. He decided, with the finality of a collapsing star, that he must have her. However, he knew that terror was a clumsy tool for seduction. He needed a form that embodied both immense power and profound gentleness. His choice fell upon a bull. Not a common beast, but a creature of impossible beauty. It appeared at the edge of the royal herds, its hide not simple white, but a luminous, pearlescent shade, as if its body were carved from moonlight. Its horns were perfectly curved arcs of polished silver, and its eyes, the masterstroke of the disguise, were a deep sapphire, holding a universe of calm wisdom. The bull approached, and Europa, drawn by its beauty, felt no fear. She and her handmaidens adorned it with garlands, twining bright petals between its silver horns. The bull remained placid, even kneeling before Europa in a clear gesture of invitation. This act of submission from a creature of such obvious strength utterly disarmed her. Laughing, Europa did something daring. She climbed onto its broad, strong back. The moment she was settled, the change was instantaneous and terrifying. The gentle creature vanished. In its place was a force of raw, explosive power. The bull surged to its feet and bolted. Its hooves pounded the earth like war drums, heading for the sea. Europa screamed, clinging desperately to its silver horns as her homeland receded. With a mighty heave, the bull plunged into the surf. It swam with divine stamina, its great body cutting through the waves. Europa's initial terror slowly gave way to a strange, awestruck numbness. A retinue of sea beings appeared. Dolphins leapt beside them,
and beneath the surface she glimpsed the shimmering forms of the Nereids, the nymphs of the sea. This was no mere animal, she realized. This was a god. After a long journey, a new shore rose from the horizon, the island of Crete. The bull swam ashore and came to a halt on the warm sand. Here, its form began to dissolve. The white hide shimmered away like mist, the powerful animal body resolving into the majestic, awe-inspiring form of a god. Standing before her was Zeus, king of Olympus. His eyes no longer gentle, but burning with the triumphant fire of possession. Europa's life was irrevocably altered. The mortal princess became the consort of a god, the queen of a new land, and the matriarch of a dynasty that would name a continent. She became the mother of kings and judges of the underworld, Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Sarpedon. To commemorate his conquest, Zeus chose to honor the disguise that had made it possible. He lifted the image of the white bull into the heavens, creating a new constellation. But he did not place the entire animal in the sky. He placed only its head and powerful forequarters, as if it is forever emerging from the celestial sea, its head lowered in an eternal, unstoppable charge. And so the constellation of Taurus took its place in the Zodiac. To the ancients, its appearance in the spring sky was a powerful signal heralding the return of fertility to the fields. It was a symbol of raw, untamable power. Yet for those who knew the story, Taurus was also an unsettling reminder of the thin veil between the divine and the bestial, between seduction and abduction. Each year, as it charges across the night sky, it retells the story of Europa, of a perfect day shattered by the coming of a god, and of the terrifying, magnificent journey that followed when she climbed onto the back of the great white bull.
From the myth of Taurus, a story of divine obsession and capture, our celestial path leads to a tale of a bond forged not by a god's will, but by a moral heart, a love so powerful it ascended to the heavens. We journey now to the disciplined martial kingdom of Sparta, a land that prized loyalty above all else, to witness the story of a brotherhood that defied even death. This is the saga of Gemini, the twins. Their origin was a myth in itself. Queen Leda of Sparta was visited by two suitors in a single night, her mortal husband, King Tyndareus, and the great god Zeus disguised as a magnificent swan. From this divided union, a divided legacy was born. Leda brought forth two sets of twins. Castor was the son of Tyndareus, and so was entirely mortal, embodying the peak of human potential. Pollux was the son of Zeus, and he carried the divine spark of immortality, a demigod of prodigious strength. Yet this fundamental difference did not create a rift between the brothers. From their first breath, they were two halves of a single soul. They grew up as one, inseparable in the harsh crucible of Spartan training. Their talents were perfectly complementary. Castor was a peerless horseman, able to tame any steed, and a brilliant warrior whose skill with the sword and spear was unmatched among mortals. Pollux, blessed with divine might, was an invincible boxer, his fists moving with the speed of lightning. Together, they were known as the Dioscuri, the sons of Zeus, and their fame as heroes spread across Greece. They sailed with Jason on the Argo, and in a great storm they were said to have saved the ship when twin stars, St. Elmo's fire, appeared above their heads, calming the waves. They became revered as the saviors of sailors, a beacon of hope in the tempest. But the fates had woven a thread of tragedy into their glorious destiny. The brothers became entangled in a bitter feud with their cousins, Idas and Lynceus, over two beautiful princesses they were to marry. Pride and honor, the unforgiving currency of the heroic age, left no room for compromise.
The cousins met on a field of battle to settle the dispute with blood. A fierce combat ensued, hero against hero. While the immortal Pollux engaged his powerful foes, a spear found its mark. Castor, the mortal twin, was struck down, his life extinguished on the cold ground. In that instant, Pollux felt a part of his own soul go silent. His immortal heart, which knew no fear of death for itself, was shattered by a grief that was absolute. He unleashed his divine rage, swiftly avenging his brother, but the victory was ash in his mouth. He knelt and cradled his brother's lifeless body, and the full crushing weight of his own eternal life descended upon him. What was immortality but an endless, empty eternity without the one person who gave it meaning? His gift had become an unbearable curse. Weeping with a sorrow that shook the heavens, Pollux cried out to his divine father Zeus. He did not plead for vengeance, he pleaded for release. He offered to surrender his own immortality, to trade his golden seat on Olympus for a place beside his beloved brother in the cold, silent darkness of the underworld. From his throne, Zeus was moved by a love so pure and selfless, it challenged the very laws he governed. He could not make a mortal fully immortal, nor could he allow his divine son to perish. But he could bend the rules of creation. In an act of profound compassion, he devised a unique arrangement. The twins would not be separated. They would share a single existence between them. For one day they would reside on Mount Olympus in the light of the gods. The next, they would descend together into the shadowy realm of Hades. Their life would be an eternal cycle of reunion and farewell, a constant dance between light and shadow, forever together, even in their separation. To serve as a monument to their unbreakable bond, Zeus lifted their image into the night sky, placing them side by side as the constellation Gemini. Their two brightest stars, named Castor and Pollux, shine as a prominent testament to their devotion. The twins are the ultimate symbol of brotherhood, a story of a loyalty so profound it overcame the finality of death. They are a celestial promise that the strongest force in the universe is the bond we share, a light that can shine even across the great divide between life and the afterlife.
From the noble heights of the Gemini myth, a story of a bond that transcended death, our journey now descends into the murky depths of a primordial swamp. The tale of Cancer is not one of a celebrated hero or a magnificent beast, but of a humble creature's quiet loyalty. It is a myth that reminds us that not all constellations blaze with the light of victory, and that sometimes the greatest honor is reserved for the faithful who fall in service. Our story unfolds in the foul and stagnant swamp of Lerna, a nightmarish quagmire that was said to be a gateway to the underworld. Here, Heracles faced his second labor, to slay the monstrous Hydra. This was a creature of pure chaos, a colossal serpent with 9 heads, whose breath was poison and whose blood was death. Its most terrifying power was its unnatural regeneration. For every head the hero severed, 2 more would spring forth, hissing and venomous from the bleeding stump. It was a maddening battle against a foe that grew stronger from its own wounds. Watching from her throne on Olympus was the goddess Hera, her heart a cold knot of hatred for Heracles, the living symbol of her husband's infidelity. She saw the hero and his nephew, Iolaus, beginning to turn the tide of the battle by using a flaming torch to cauterize the Hydra's necks. Furious that her champion of chaos was failing, Hera decided to intervene. She needed to break the hero's rhythm, to add one more element of discord to the fight. She did not send a great monster from afar, but chose a champion from the swamp itself. Her divine will descended not as a voice, but as a silent, irresistible command that seeped through the black water and the stinking mud. It was a summons to an ancient being who dwelled in the silted darkness, Carcinus, a giant crab. For centuries, it had been a silent king in its own dark domain. Now, a purpose beyond all instinct filled its being. The Queen of Heaven had called, and it must obey. With a deliberate, relentless scuttle, Carcinus emerged from the mire. To its ancient eyes, Heracles was a creature of fire and violence, an intruder desecrating its primordial home. It moved through the chaos of the battle, unnoticed by the hero who was focused on the thrashing heads of the Hydra. Fulfilling its divine mandate, the crab scurried to the demigod's feet and clamped its powerful pincer onto his ankle. The pain was sharp and unexpected. It was not a mortal wound, but it was a vicious distraction. Heracles roared in surprise and annoyance, his footing slipping in the slick mud. In that single moment of broken concentration, the Hydra lunged, sinking its fangs deep into the hero's shoulder. The crab had succeeded. It had given the monster an advantage. For one brief, shining instant, Carcinus had fulfilled its duty to its goddess. That instant was all it would ever have. Heracles, enraged by the pain and the new wound, looked down and saw the source of his distraction. With no thought, no ceremony, he lifted his great heavy foot and brought it down with crushing finality. There was a sharp, sickening crack as the crab's ancient carapace shattered. Its life was extinguished in a moment, its broken body ground back into the foul mud from which it had come. Hera witnessed it all from on high. She saw her champion's swift, ignominious end, but she also saw its perfect, unquestioning loyalty. The crab had been given an impossible task, to face a demigod in the midst of a legendary battle, and it had not hesitated. It had done its duty. In a world of fickle heroes and scheming gods, such simple, absolute faith was a thing to be honored. Hera would not allow her faithful servant to be forgotten in the mud. She reached down with her divine will and gathered the crab's humble, broken spirit. She lifted it from the swamp, cleansing it of the filth of its end, and raised it into the heavens. She did not make it a blazing, arrogant star, but a constellation of faint, gentle lights, a quiet presence you must search for to truly see. The constellation of Cancer became an eternal celestial memorial to silent devotion. Its faint light is a reminder that courage is not always measured in victory, but that in the willingness to serve, and that even the smallest creature can earn an immortal place in the stars through an act of pure, unwavering loyalty.
From the murky depths of Lerna and the tale of a humble crab's loyalty, our celestial journey now bursts into the sun-scorched hills of Nemea for a saga of roaring, triumphant power. The myth of Leo is not one of quiet devotion, but of a heroic battle against an impossible foe. It is the story of the first great labor of Heracles, a victory so profound it would forever define him and place the most regal of beasts among the stars. The task was conceived as a death sentence. Heracles, as penance for a past tragedy, was bound to serve the weak and fearful king Eurystheus. For his first labor, the king sent him to the valley of Nemea with a seemingly simple command: slay the monstrous lion that terrorized the land and bring back its hide. But this was no mortal beast. The Nemean Lion was a supernatural terror, born of monsters, with a magnificent golden hide that was utterly impervious to any weapon forged by man. It had turned the once peaceful valley into a desolate wasteland, a graveyard for all the warriors who had foolishly tried to slay it. Upon arriving in the silent, fear-haunted land, Heracles soon tracked the beast to a rocky clearing. It was more magnificent and terrifying than any legend had described. A creature of immense size and power, its golden fur seeming to blaze in the sunlight. Heracles, a master archer, fired an arrow with all his might. It struck the lion's flank and shattered into splinters as if hitting a wall of solid bronze. The lion merely blinked. Undeterred, Heracles charged with his sword, but the blade bent uselessly against the magical hide. Finally, he swung his massive olive wood club, a blow that could fell a giant, and brought it crashing down on the lion's skull. The club splintered, and the beast, though staggered and now thoroughly enraged, was not seriously harmed. In that moment, Heracles understood. His weapons were toys against this creature. His only path to victory lay in his own divine strength, guided by a clever strategy. He pursued the lion as it retreated to its lair, a dark cave that cut straight through a rocky hill. Seeing that the cave had two entrances, Heracles knew the beast could easily escape. With immense effort, he dragged massive boulders and blocked one of the openings, sealing it completely. Then he cast aside his broken weapons, took a deep breath, and entered the darkness of the remaining entrance, deliberately trapping himself inside with the monster. There would be no retreat. What followed was not a hunt, but a primal duel in the claustrophobic gloom. It was a brutal wrestling match of pure, savage force. The lion's claws, as sharp as swords, tore up the hero's flesh, but Heracles endured. He dodged the snapping jaws, and with a surge of his demigod strength, he managed to lock his massive arms around the thick, muscular neck. The true battle began, a slow, agonizing contest of strength and endurance. The lion thrashed with terrifying power, its immense body heaving, trying to break the hero's grip. Heracles held fast, his own muscles screaming, his vision blurring from the strain, pouring every ounce of his being into the stranglehold. Finally, after a long and terrible struggle, the great beast's struggles weakened, and it fell silent and still. Though victorious, Heracles faced one last problem: how to skin the beast as the king had commanded. His knife could not pierce the invulnerable hide. As he pondered the dilemma, a stroke of insight came to him. With grim ingenuity, he took one of the lion's own fallen claws, a tool as sharp and as hard as a diamond, and used it to slice open the golden pelt. Then he skinned the great beast and donned its hide as a mantle, pulling the fearsome head over his own like a helmet. It was a profound transformation. He had not just defeated his foe, he had absorbed its power and its terror, creating the iconic image that would define him for all time. When he returned to the court of Mycenae, he was no longer just a hero. He was a terrifying elemental force. King Eurystheus, upon seeing the man wearing the skin of the unkillable monster, shrieked in terror and hid in a large bronze jar, commanding that Heracles henceforth leave his trophies outside the city gates. The first labor was complete. To commemorate his son's magnificent victory, Zeus lifted the spirit of the noble and terrifying lion into the heavens. There it became the constellation of Leo, an eternal celestial emblem of courage, nobility, and the indomitable strength required to triumph over the impossible.
From the glorious, violent saga of the Nemean Lion, a myth of triumphant power, our celestial journey turns to a quieter, more sorrowful tale. The light of this next constellation is not the blaze of a hero's victory, but the gentle, melancholic glow of a long and sad farewell. This is the story of a paradise lost, of the slow fading of a golden world, and of the last immortal to walk among humankind. This is the lament of Virgo, the maiden. Our story begins in the dawn of creation, during the golden age of man. In this idyllic time, the world knew no winter, no toil, and no sorrow. The earth gave forth its bounty freely, and gods and mortals lived together in perfect harmony. Among them was the goddess Astraea, the star maiden, the personification of innocence, purity, and justice. In this perfect world, her role was a joyful one, for there was no injustice to judge. Her scales hung at her side, forever in balance, and she walked among mortals not as a judge, but as a beloved friend. But the golden age could not last. A new, lesser race of humanity was created for a silver age. With them came the seasons and the need for labor and shelter. With struggle came the first seeds of selfishness. For the first time, a harsh word was spoken, a lie was told, and a boundary was disputed. Finding this new, flawed world tiresome, the other gods began to withdraw one by one to the eternal bliss of Olympus. But Astraea, whose love for humanity was deep and patient, remained. Her role changed from companion to arbiter, as she used her scales to teach the first lessons of fairness to a world that was forgetting its innate goodness. The decline continued into the Bronze Age. Humanity, now hard and warlike, discovered how to forge weapons. The world, which had known only peace, now learned the brutal art of war. The green fields drank blood for the first time. Astraea's heart broke. She became a lonely figure of peace in an age of violence, a pleading voice of reason that was increasingly ignored. She walked the grim aftermath of battlefields, a sad, solitary immortal in a world that was choosing darkness. Finally came the Iron Age, an era of complete corruption, where every virtue was lost to greed and every sacred oath was broken for coin. Brother turned against brother, and all honor was forgotten. Astraea, in her long and lonely vigil, finally understood that her presence was no longer a comfort or a guide, but merely a ghost haunting a world that had already died in spirit. The last embers of her hope were extinguished by the cold winds of human cruelty. With a sorrow too profound for words, she made her decision. Her departure was not an angry flight, but a quiet, heartbreaking farewell. She turned her back on the cities of men, on their noise, their lies, and their violence, and walked away. As she ascended from the highest mountain, the mortal world falling away beneath her, she took one last look at the world she had so loved and so tragically lost. As she rose into the cold, clean purity of the heavens, her divine form dissolved into a constellation of starlight, an eternal maiden in the night sky. She carried with her two final mementos of the world she had left. In one hand, she held an ear of wheat, a symbol of the lost bounty and innocence of the Golden Age, which became the brilliant star we call Spica. At her side, she carried her golden scales, the tools of her long, weary labor, which were placed in the sky beside her as the constellation Libra. The constellation of Virgo is not a monument to a victory, but a memorial to a retreat. She is a silent, celestial reminder of the paradise humanity lost through its own failings. Her gentle light represents departed justice and a purity that no longer resides on earth. Yet her constant, watchful presence in the night sky holds a quiet, lingering promise, a melancholic hope that one day humanity might look up, remember the innocence it has lost, and perhaps finally be worthy of the maiden's return.